Thank you for joining on our webinar series, Why Sales Should Care About Operations. My name is Nicole Rowe, and I'm the owner of Sunrow Solutions. Sunrow Solutions, we are a consulting company that works with sales orgs and EPCs and several different tech platforms throughout the country, really focusing on streamlining processes. Let me introduce you to our panelists today. First, we have CJ, who is the COO of New Sun Power. And then we have Daniel Day, who's the CEO of Daniel Day Enterprise, and Chance, who is the CEO of Smile. Do each of you want to go and tell the group a little bit about your company? We'll start with you, CJ.
Sure. All right. Thank you. New Sun is we're relatively new to the space. Only been in the solar industry for about 4 years now, but we've grown relatively quickly. First year we did a little over 3,000 installs, and this year we're trending to finish around 8,000 by December 31st. We're sales only, and as such, I think we have a kind of a unique perspective on what it takes to really be successful without being able to control the installation side.
Awesome. Congrats on your success. That's a huge leap. And Daniel.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, and have kind of done the same thing as you, Nicole, where I help sales teams partner with installers across the country and make sure they find success in the different markets that they're in.
Perfect. Chance?
Yep, very similar to CJ. I started Smile about 6 months ago, but I've been in the space for about 5 years, and I realized that there's a lack of transparency when it came between the sales side and just the installer itself. So hopefully curing all that, and we're kind of growing rapidly. We're in a lot of main markets like Florida, Arizona, Texas, and we have a really cool blitz model. So more transparency to a lot of the reps to be able to kind of have like the sky's the limit, which I'm excited for.
Very cool. Now, as sales orgs, what are the key things that you look for when choosing an EPC? And how much do the different products and financiers they work with really come into play when you're making decisions on who you're going to work with? CJ, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think what we look for are speed and efficiency, really, to get glass on the roof and then to get PTO. I think there's a lot there's a lot of emphasis, or there has been in the past, in the solar industry on getting glass on the roof, but then I think getting to PTO, securing funding gets left behind, or has gotten left behind. Over the last 18 months, I think there's been a huge shift towards realizing the importance of being able to get PTO efficiently, avoid those clawbacks. So that's one of the things that we look for. And then the other is operational efficiency in managing cash flow. Now that financiers have cut back on M1s drastically, I think we've seen a lot of installers that were kind of mismanaging their cash and living on 20-30% M1s. Once those went away, they also fell by the wayside. So we're looking for, or what we look for, are EPCs that are able to manage cash with no M1s, right? And M1's just kind of like a bonus. And then if they're able to do that, then we feel confident that we're also going to get paid, and that our jobs, the customer, is also going to be secure.
Oh, perfect. Now, I know a couple of years ago when vetting installers, there wasn't that much that went into it. How much do you actually look at their financial stability? And do a lot of them actually show their financials nowadays just to kind of build that confidence for you?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, it's a little bit of a hurdle with some installers to ask them for their financials, but given our size, we're typically one of the top 3 biggest partners of any given EPC in our network. And so with that, we're able to throw weight around a little bit to get access to that type of information. And so I think that's something that we definitely do as part of our due diligence, because we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we have a bunch of projects on roofs and no funding. So we do that, and then in conjunction with finding out who else they've partnered with, major dealers that we can ask, how have the payments been? Has there been any delays? Have there been any issues? How good are they making getting to PTO? Because everything is sunshine and rainbows when you talk to an EPC for the first time, and they may be a little hesitant to get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, no, I always say it's always those first couple deals that are key, just to make sure that they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do. Daniel, what about you?
Everything CJ said was spot on. And I think in addition to that, everything comes down to relationships. Like he said, that first call, and I have a unique perspective being on both the operations and the sales side, working with the installers and the sales teams. You know, when talking to a sales team, I can tell them, like to CJ's point, all the things that they want to hear. But really, it comes down to execution. I can tell them that we have a competitive red line and we install fast and we pay on time. But if you don't execute, it doesn't matter, right? That sales team will leave and go somewhere else. And so as a sales team, you know, you have to really, you know, vet them out, do a good job vetting them out, but it all comes down to relationships. So if you have a strong relationship with good communication and transparency, to Chance's point earlier, it usually works out well.
Perfect. Chance, what about you?
Yeah, I think that CJ and Daniel kind of hit it spot on. I do think it's just kind of about the relationships that you do build with these installers. And one thing that I've done is I've kind of been the guinea pig and trying it out for the first couple deals, just seeing exactly how streamlined their process is and how they have stuck to their word. I mean, it's super easy for a lot of installers to kind of throw a little bit of fluff in there with you're going to get this, you're going to get this, you're going to get this, but actually seeing it for yourself has been something that I have done in the past, and it's worked really well for me just to get a close communication with these people, understand how everything does work before throwing all my guys into the fire or something else going south. So that's something I would just add on to what they just said. That's worked for me pretty well.
No, I think that's awesome. Just leading from the front so you know exactly what your teams are going to experience really helps. So next question, how can sales orgs take more control back from the EPCs so you know that you're going to get paid faster with more reliability? CJ?
So I think the emergence of services and companies like Paykeeper are massive, because especially in the last, like I said, reference that time frame before, the 18 months, like 18, 24 months ago, the ball was securely held by the EPCs and they held all the funds. And then as M1 started getting cut back, some of the ones that mismanaged funds were robbing Peter to pay Paul. And a lot of times you got to the end of the line and then you were left with a bunch of projects that were unfunded. So the emergence of Paykeeper has been huge. That's one of the things that we always ask when we're getting onboarded with an EPC is, do they have a relationship with Paykeeper, or are they willing to do some type of split pay with the financiers? Because we always look to get paid directly from a financier instead of getting paid from the EPC to eliminate as much risk as possible.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. We've definitely seen a lot of different players kind of just exit the business or go out of business over the past few years. So I think having that security, especially with the growth and scale that New Sun has, is just such key. Daniel, what about you?
I think it comes down to making sure the expectations are set in the beginning on what's required from the sales team, you know, whatever documents are needed. You know, there's only so much you can do, you know, CJ's point, as a sales org, you know, to move the ball along to get it to PTO, but making sure that it's defined clearly what the sales team is responsible for and what the ops team is responsible for, is probably the closest you can get to it.
Great. Chance?
Yeah, adding on to both what they just said, I would say just making sure like production and everything's also met from their side too. Because I remember we used to have a lot of change orders that slowed down the process. So making sure like adders and everything are actually accounted for, the production's actually met. Because when that doesn't happen, it's a nightmare getting all these docs signed, and then also just the types of forms and information we actually need to be able to submit in the job forms just to keep the process actually moving fast, and having PM and the reps in line. So having group chats and everything like set up where people are actually getting after the reps and making sure that it's urgent.
Great. Now, have you all ever considered with taking over more of that operations as part of that process with different things like having reps lead site surveys, whether it's flying drones on site to kind of speed up the process there, or taking over some of that project management? CJ?
Yeah, and we have a few partners that ask our sales reps to take the photos, you know, do the site survey there on site, not with drones or anything, but I think being able to use a drone would be much better, because I think getting the ability to take good pictures, you're pretty limited if you don't have a ladder and if you're not trying to like open up an electrical box or anything like that. So I think taking control using any new tech would be huge. And that's something that we try to express. What we want to be is a good partner to our EPCs. We basically understand that we're the ones that have a good relationship with the customer right off the bat. And so we're the ones that can kind of foment that and continue moving the project forward, even past install. We make it really clear to our sales reps, your job's not done when the glass hits the roof. Your job is done really after PTO. And so we try to create that sense of a true partnership with the EPC, and kind of like Daniel was saying, and set clear expectations of what they expect from us. And then we are, I think, kind of liberal with the offering up of our resources to do maybe even more than that they ask for, so that the project moves quickly.
Great. Daniel?
Yeah, I think if you have the ability to take on a little bit more, I mean, at the end of the day, right, the sales team, like, that's their money. And so the more you can take on that doesn't take you away from selling more deals, right? There's an opportunity cost to taking on too much operations. But if you can do some things like the site survey and making sure you're in good communication with the homeowner, it can definitely speed up the process a little bit.
Chance, what about you?
Yeah, I think if it's going to speed up the process and it's going to eliminate a step where you could just get it done right there, I think that, especially just in like the sales cycle, again, 3, 4, 5, 6 days of speeding it up is a big difference. So if it's going to help eliminate a step or a hiccup down the line, I think it's definitely worth it. If it's taking pictures or doing your own site surveys, I know we had to do that for one installer, and it actually went a lot smoother than I thought. So definitely, if it's going to speed it up, I'm for sure with it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that probably over the next year, I think we're going to see a lot more that starts to evolve with that, especially with new technology that's consistently coming out. Now, obviously, I know sales commissions always are going to be the most important thing that the reps really leaning into. Have you ever experienced those sales commissions getting delayed or clawed back due to issues with an EPC? And what have you learned from those experiences? And what are best practices that you can share for others to look out for?
Yeah, we've
CJ?
definitely experienced that. I think some of the best practices are kind of what I said before, is setting the correct expectation with whoever's closing the account. Your job is not done at point of sale when the contract's signed. Your job is not done once the installation is scheduled or even completed. Your job is done once it gets to PTO, and even beyond that, because as banks have tightened up everything, they've also been way more aggressive in clawing back funding, even post PTO. If the customer is complaining about something, GoodLeap is more than happy to take that money back and then make the installer go rip the panels off the roof. And now you're stuck as a sales dealer with a bill, not only for the funding that you received that's being clawed back, but oftentimes with the cost of removing the panels in the first place, and an extra truck roll and everything that comes with that. So I think what we've done is we've tried to create a culture and create an environment where the sales reps understand that it's really an ongoing process for years, because not only are you trying to keep that customer satisfied for a while after PTO, but you're trying to get referrals from that customer. And if the customer is happy and is satisfied, they're going to be more likely to give you more business, repeat business, and we can multiply those sales instead of just trying to grow by addition.
Yeah, I think that's key. It's a lot of people think after install, but as you said, just it's that forever partnership. And again, it also leads to just more referrals down the line. Daniel?
I think if you've been in the solar industry long enough, you've probably had something clawed back or not been paid on something. I think it's just, unfortunately, it's part of the industry. I think with the amount of TPOs that people are selling currently, the commissions change if production's off. And so, one of the things that I try to stress is when you are doing a proposal or initial design, is making sure it's as accurate as possible, making sure the azimuth is correct, the shading is correct. Otherwise, the commission is going to change, and that's never fun. And to Chance's point earlier, like going back and doing a change order, it is probably not going to happen. The customer's probably going to cancel, or the rep's just going to forget about it because their commission was cut in half and they don't care about it anymore, and which doesn't create a good experience for anybody. So making sure the design on the front end is done accurately is probably a huge piece of it right now with TPOs.
No, I agree. And it's also making sure that the EPC that you're working with is using the software that you know is going to have that accuracy from the start. Chance, what about you?
I mean, of course, I've had clawbacks and stuff like that in the past, especially just like my past company. But since we're a little bit newer, so far we've had some good luck, I would say, when it comes to who we've been doing work with and funding timelines. But fingers crossed, it continues to keep going well. But definitely just partner up with the right installers. I mean, I like the installers we have right now in Florida and all that good stuff. So I haven't really experienced many delays, but I know that it's business. It definitely can happen. And I think the most important part is having a transparent relationship with your reps. Like hiccups are going to happen. Everyone does understand that here and there, but just trying to eliminate it as much as possible when that time does come.
Yeah, I think too, it's finding the EPCs that are going to be transparent with you, take that
Right.
time to actually go through your pipeline and let you know the reason why. It's solar is still a construction industry, but it's making sure that the rep and everyone knows the reason why behind a change and then also how to solve in the future. Now, going into 2025, what are some strategies that you're going to give salespeople to help them sell more and work better with EPCs? CJ?
That's a great question. And so I think as far as selling more, I think the key is trying to decrease the learning curve. We're constantly trying to recruit and grow, but as you recruit and grow, you're bringing brand new people into the solar industry who have never sold before. And with that comes those inherent struggles of figuring out what to say on the doorstep, figuring out how to close a deal and what's appropriate and what isn't. And so we've started using an AI tool that records conversations, gives constant feedback to the sales reps, both the setters and the closers, and then allows team leads, managers, and anyone that's in a leadership position to review those conversations, provide coaching to the people, their people, and then it also has like a cool training library aspect to it, so you can keep track of good wins and overcoming how certain reps overcome objections. So I think the way that you really get people in the right position or put people in the right position to win is by gathering as much data as possible. And what's awesome about the state of technology is that we're constantly improving, and it seems like every 6 months there's something new that's coming out that's giving us the opportunity to gather more data. And then it's a question of how do you leverage that data. And then to your question of dealing with the EPCs, what we found is that our really one of our founding philosophies is kind of a separation of labor. We're specialization. We want closers to focus on closing. We want setters to focus on setting. And then we want project managers to focus on the relationships with the EPCs as much as possible. And so our project managers are really that bridge between the closer and the EPC. And so they have a good relationship on both sides. And sure, the closer can communicate directly with the EPC at any time, but we don't think that's the best use of their time. And so it's better to have them constantly running appointments at dinner tables with decision makers, and then having project managers at HQ that are dealing with change orders, talking with EPCs and customers. So basically at contract signing, our closers will typically create a group text with a project manager and the customer. And then the project manager will then have that direct access to the customer to help with any process, and then get the EPC involved when needed.
No, that's great. And I think it's a great way to just continue just to streamline that process and keep everything on track. And then obviously making sure that that customer is getting that best experience. Daniel, what about you?
Well, to kind of piggyback off what CJ was saying, there's a ton of technology out now that we have access to. And typically it comes down to the people who put the work in to actually want to get better. I mean, you can make really, really good money in this industry if you treat it as a profession, and if you're a professional and you're constantly working on trying to get better. Too often I think people, rely on just being able to go out and whether it's knocking doors or getting appointments, and they feel like, hey, I can just keep doing what I've been doing. But if you're not learning, especially as batteries have gotten more prevalent here, and we're going to see in 2025, it's going to get even be a bigger part of the conversation. There's a lot of learning that can be done still from everybody, whether it's the different financing options, the different battery options, and how they all play together. And really 2025, it starts today, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you want to have a good 2025, you need to have installs going in the last week of December. So that way you're getting paid that first week of January, not starting in January and hoping to get paid at the end of January or early February. So starting right now is really the key to a good 2025, I think.
Great. Chance?
Yeah, for me, personally, I'm just getting back to this leading from the front. I know that it's a lot to be able to balance, but I like blitzing with a lot of the guys as well, where they can see like live training and making it a lot more simple when it does come to like the door-to-door training. I'm a kind of a traditional, I think AI and stuff like that, sometimes it gets to be really complicating, versus just like actually having tons of different voice memos or just videos on the doors, being able to show these people what it really takes to be able to do 40, 50, 60 in a month just by also just doing the old, kind of just getting back to the basics essentially. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. I feel like there's a lot of leaders in this industry that don't really, they just kind of accept that manager role and don't go above and beyond. So I think blitzing different markets is going to be super important. And just staying really sharp and with, of course, like your craft. So always getting better, always learning. I think that's one of the big things. And then also finding different people to delegate time with. I'm going to be hiring a lot coming up here to start January out. So the people that are really good at what they do can focus on what they're best at, and hiring out for the stuff that I'm not as good at, or a couple of our other leaders need a little help with too. So.
Awesome. No, I think that's great tips from everybody. Now, in what ways have you seen sales team leverage customer feedback to help EPCs improve their services? CJ?
So, I mean, we've really tried to leverage customer feedback to benefit ourselves. We use something similar to RepCard with a QR code that goes directly to a Google review, and we try to we gamified it, and so we allowed reps to. We created a game around who could get the most 5-star reviews and that type of thing. So that helped us a lot as we were getting off the ground to create an online presence. When people look us up, customers look us up, they could see that we're a legitimate company and that we have several thousand installations in place and a lot of 5-star reviews. I'm not sure how we could help make an EPC's name better, because typically the way we're presenting it to the customer is that we're impartial. We're like Priceline. We work for them. And so we're trying to set them up with the best scenario for their specific situation, whether that's the financing option, whether that's the installation partner for their specific area, or whatever the case might be. And so we typically try to sell the customer on ourselves. We're the concierge, we're the expert, we're the agents that are going to walk them through this whole process. And they're never going to have to deal with that EPC because they'll be dealing directly with us, and then we'll be dealing with the EPC.
Perfect. Daniel?
Yeah, I think reviews are kind of a slippery slope. A lot of people want reviews, especially if they're good reviews. And I think too often EPCs, they would rather not have a review than have a bad review. But I feel like a bad review is a chance to, like make it right, and show people don't judge you off of like how you like if you do what you say you're gonna do, that doesn't really go very far. But if you mess up, even with 2 strikes, you can still hit a home run. And if you mess up and then you go back and you make it right, sometimes that's almost better than just doing what you said you're going to do the first time. And if they leverage those bad reviews to make sure they make it right, I think it says more about a company than somebody who just does what they say they're going to do.
No, I agree. It's how they respond and follow through just to make and solve that issue. Chance?
Yeah, I don't have much to add on there actually. Going off of what Daniel just said, one of the things that always actually helped me sell more deals is talking about my worst nightmare, because we actually did something about it. So I think leveraging those bad stories and those bad reviews on how we actually fixed it are huge. So if you can somehow find a way to be able to do more of that, I think that's the great part about it, versus just letting the bad reviews sit there with no response. I think that's where people start losing sales, or companies start losing credibility.
Yeah. No, great. Now, obviously, being in the industry for so long, I've consistently seen sometimes just the friction between sales and operations. Obviously, both parties need each other in order to succeed. And have you ever seen different incentives that operations have also aligned with sales incentives that have helped kind of keep both parties aligned and motivated for just that same end result of that happy customer? CJ?
Yeah, I think probably the most effective one that we've seen has been a per watt bonus based on pull through rate. because then we can, and as a company, we don't want to keep that bonus. We want to pass that on to the sales reps. And so we're perfectly transparent. This is a 33-cent bonus, a 5-cent bonus, whatever it is, depending on the tiers that they're hitting. And so that will incentivize them to continue to do their job, post that contract being signed, getting that glass on the roof and making sure it goes all the way through PTO. But I think this, more than just an incentive, I think that it's strategically choosing the correct partners and then being able to walk away from an EPC that isn't performing to your standard. Because like I said before, ultimately we're selling ourselves to the customer, but the EPC is a reflection of us. We're saying that we're vouching for this EPC. And so I love this saying is the longer you stay on the wrong train, the more expensive it will be to get home. And so just because you're in with an EPC and you have several projects in the pipeline, megawatts or whatever it is, if they're underperforming, for me, the best way to communicate that, besides just, I mean, obviously telling them, but it's to let your volume speak. And so by cutting back the volume and telling them, let's focus on the pipeline that's already in place and correcting those issues, we've seen really good results with that. So I think it goes back to choosing the right partner and then basing all those, it really comes down to that pull-through rate, basing any incentive on pull-through.
Great. Daniel?
Yeah, I think on the installer side, right, like what I've seen work really well is anytime they can, obviously speed to roof is huge for everybody. And so if you can incentivize the ops team to make sure they're within their SLAs, certain percentage of the jobs within the SLA, or rewarding the people, the project managers who helped get the ball to PTO within a certain time. Usually that's kind of what would align the ops and the sales on the incentive side.
Great. Chance?
I haven't like seen as much because I've always just been like the sales side, but I know that one thing that my old company did a good job of as well to incentivize the ops side of things, just making sure that everything was actually like tidied up and cleaned up after an install. I know it sounds like something that was really, really little, but they would give bonuses on top of that. So I know like that is something that's been working, but I'll just kind of let those two other answers. Those are probably better than mine.
Yeah, we've all seen it. I think we've all gotten that angry text from that rep in the past and that customer with something left on the job site. So I do think that's a great thing to also make sure is obviously as part of any operation incentives.
One thing
Now, also, yep.
I want
Go
to
ahead.
add to this is usually it's like those text messages stem from like a lack of perspective from the other side, whether it's a ops person who's sending a mean or, a mean is kind of a funny word, but a text to a sales rep because they didn't send something in, or the sales rep sends a mean text back to the operations person. It usually stems from a lack of perspective from the other person's, point of view. Like that ops person doesn't know that sales rep knocked out in, 110-degree heat for 3 weeks to get that deal, and that's the only deal they have in the pipeline, and they need that deal to pay their rent or their mortgage or feed their family. And just along those same lines, the salesperson doesn't know that the ops person's been yelled at by 10 other sales reps, and that's just the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. So it's really about understanding what the other person is, trying to put yourself in their shoes, so you can understand like what they're going through. That you're not the only one, probably.
One thing that I always
Yeah.
used to do as well, just like personally, like to incentivize like installers, make sure that they kind of just go like the extra mile just for my installs. Would always be having an agreement where if we get referrals, whether it's people walking by while they're doing the installs, just being extra friendly. I used to have a couple agreements with installers where if we get referrals, we would do $1,000 each. So that's another really good way to just make sure that they do a good job with your install and with your homeowner. Because I made some installers some bank just from that.
And taking care of the installers on the sales side, right? If you're a sales team and you show up with breakfast burritos or whatever it may be, crumble cookie to the office staff, like it goes a really long way when you need that job to get pushed through down the road. And I think if you take care of each other, honestly, it goes so far, and it all comes down to relationships, like we had talked about earlier.
Yeah. Now, just a reminder for everybody as well, we do have the Q&A open. So if you have any questions for any of the gentlemen on the panel, you can just use that Q&A feature and we'll answer them as well. Now, next question. What are some common operational challenges that your sales team faces now, and how do you ensure those problems don't slow down that sales cycle? CJ?
I think we sell a ton of TPO, and so I think really production-based change orders are one of the most common speed bumps that we hit. So and we rely on the installer to accurately calculate that production. Nicole, like you referred to earlier, have the correct software in place so that what we're presenting is actually going to be reality. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And I think the way we've addressed that is training reps to understand when they're selling TPO, they're not selling solar panels, they're selling electricity. And so they have to understand the basic philosophy behind that is now going to drive how you design the system, how you price the system, and how you're going to pitch it to the customer and set those expectations for the customer. So then if a production-based change order comes, it's pretty easy to go to explain to that customer why their system is going from a 7.5 kilowatt to a 7.89 or whatever the case might be. And they're less hung up on the fact they're having more or fewer solar panels, and they're more focused on that production number. So I think having that rep educated on how to do that would help speed things up. But other than that, I mean, that's probably the thing we run into the most.
Yeah, and I think it really comes into play, obviously, that upfront software that they're using at the time of sale, and then also what they're doing at site audit. Because there's still a lot of people out there that are still getting on that roof with that ladder, measuring with a tape, doing that drawing just on that back of that paper that you know is not going to be that accuracy from the start. So making sure that your installer is also using that latest and greatest technology that kind of just bundles that together, that again, you're not going to have to worry about changes that are going to happen after install, but you're going to know right at site audit that that's going to be exactly what's going on that customer's roof.
Yep.
Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, operationally with sales teams, typically you see different challenges in different markets. The change order on TPO products is a big one. Recruiting, having a good process for recruiting and training is usually the other one you see, and keeping reps around. So just a process for making sure everybody feels seen and heard on the sales side to where they don't want to leave and go somewhere else. CJ hit it on the head though with the TPO change orders. It's probably the biggest one.
Chance.
Yeah, I'd say TPO and change orders as well. That's definitely what slows down everything the most. And then just having someone else staying on top of when actual docs need to just be submitted, the faster the better, versus 2-3 days later. Again, just getting everything done as fast as possible, just like that little nitpicky stuff. So we just have someone that is constantly nagging our reps, making sure that we're getting the docs and the forms in ASAP right after the deal's actually signed. That's what I would say.
Now, yeah, have you all, obviously with TPO being just prime lending right now, what best practices have you implemented other than educating reps on just really what goes into that design software and what they're using that has kind of helped bridge that gap and helped eliminate some of those change orders?
I think educating sales reps is key. I don't think we can just like gloss over that and say, besides educating sales reps, what else have you done? I think educating sales reps is 101, and that has to be. You can't just put an iPad in somebody's hand and tell them to go sell. And I think probably the piece of education that has helped the most is helping closers understand or be able to spot an error or spot a problem in production. So it's like, okay, this is a 6 kilowatt system. We have a south and west facing array, but it's, we're clocking 1900 sun hours. What happened? Something's off here. Right. And so being able to do that. And then I think if you want to I don't think it's beneficial for sales reps to get super technical into like clipping and understanding how the inverters relationship works with the solar panels and all that stuff. I think it's better to just give them generalities where they know enough to be dangerous, and they might not be able to tell you what is wrong, but they can tell you that something is wrong, and then they can escalate it, and an expert can go in there and say, okay, I see what's going on here, and fix it.
Great. Daniel.
Yeah, and with technology, right? So it all comes down to the training. I know reps who make almost 7 figures and they don't know what azimuth is, and so it's like, it's it's scary. Obviously with technology now and AI designs that come out. Some of them come out perfect, right? You couldn't do it better yourself. And other ones, it's like they have the panels facing north when really they're facing south, or vice versa, right? And that's where things get messed up, is when reps don't double check to make sure that the design is done properly, taking the little extra time to make sure, hey, is this actually facing the right direction? And there's so many different proposal tools out there now, and 3 or 4 major different TPO products that people are using. Just take the extra time to make sure it's done accurately, make sure the shading's accurate, make sure it doesn't do you any good to try to fit extra panels up there if it's not going to fit, or to say, oh, this tree is going to be cut if it's not, because it's going to mess it up down the road.
Great. Chance.
Yeah, just kind of what they both said, and then also just who's actually closing the deals. I think being selective on who's actually closing deals is something that's huge. Not everyone and their grandma should be allowed to be able to close a deal, especially if you have setters. So just making sure you have the right people doing it, not the ones that just can post on a board saying, "Hey, I closed a deal," but at the end of the day, if you don't do it the right way, you're not getting paid. So you're doing your setter a disservice. So being selective on who's actually allowed to, I think, is also a really big thing too. So I'm just going to add that.
Yeah. Now, we've heard a lot about training and educating reps. Now, when it comes to training, what are the best practices, and what would you give suggestions to other leaders out there on what they can do to just better train their reps and educate them so they can just make sure that they are delivering that top tier product?
So we're lucky to have some of the most talented reps in the industry, just by sheer volume of sales reps. And we came from the world of alarms, and some of the best reps to ever knock a door in alarms now sell solar for us. And so they have over a decade of experience on the doors. And so what we've done, but I think what we've done a good job of, is creating a media content library that anyone in the company can leverage, giving them access to some of the most talented sales reps that have ever knocked a door. And so they're able to go and see, how these guys do everything from prospect to close, to manage their pipeline, to handle change orders, to get referrals. So it's really, and credit goes out to our CMO that's done a fantastic job, Kevin Swiss, detailing, or like breaking down what reps need to know, and creating that library, that archive that people can access at any time. So I think having that is step one, and is a huge, for us, like, it's a recruiting tool for us, because it's not something you can just go buy, from one of these companies that sells courses, right? And you want to become whatever, sign up for this thing, and we're going to give you access to all the best sales reps. These are people who actually work for us, work within our system, and they're going to show you exactly how it works within our ecosystem. So I think that, but then also we have this, we're actually at our leadership retreat right now. So we met with all, like, our top 40 managers yesterday. And the point we really try to drive home is, how are you adding value to your people? How are you justifying the paycheck that you're receiving? Because most of them don't sell individual deals anymore. They're just running organizations. How are you justifying the per watt fee, essentially, that you're taking from your sales reps? And so, on top of the ability for anyone to go look at that media archive, I think that in-person, one-on-one, or in front of the group in-person training is absolutely crucial. And it's something that gets overlooked, I think, a lot in the solar industry, because we have a history in solar of maybe being a little lackadaisical, meeting once or twice a week, and teams just kind of go out and knock, and guys kind of are self-sufficient. Most of our teams are meeting 5 to 6 times a week, and they're having 5 to 6 45-minute trainings during that meeting that are addressing issues that sales reps are facing in that moment, real time. And so there's never a period where it's like, oh, I had this struggle, or we have a rash of problems that are all similarly related, let's address it in the meeting in 5 days from now. It's the next day. And I think that's been one of our, like, secret sauces.
No, I love that. I think any type of mentorship and coaching is just huge. And take everything, as we said before, as a learning opportunity to always continue to grow and evolve. Daniel.
To touch on what CJ was saying, I think making it a priority, right, as a leader, the training aspect and the learning aspect, like having a good LMS. It sounds like CJ has a really good LMS, and it's like making that a priority. And really, it's like I'm a huge fan of gamification, and if you can gamify, we always gamify production, right? We gamify hit the doors, or we gamify, things that are all um, based on production. But you could also gamify the learning aspect of it too, and rewarding people for actually taking the time to go and learn it, because really it'll save you, and it'll probably make the organization more money if you have them focus on that piece up front, even though it's a little bit of maybe their production's not as great initially because they're spending more time learning. I think down the road it pays itself back pretty quickly.
Great. Now, Chance, I know you take that very hands-on approach. Can you dive into a little bit more of like how you get in the weeds with your teams and really coach them?
Yeah, whether it's them shadowing, but I would just say simple is better, to be honest. Like a lot of the word tracks that I'm always giving and objection files and all that, like I've always been stupid simple with a lot of the stuff that I do, whether it's in the house or on the door. So it's not really complex, where it's kind of like the telephone game, right? The more complex you make something, the worse and worse it's always going to get. So I always like to just kind of base everything off of being stupid simple with the door-to-door approach. I mean, I've done a ton of volume, like my first year in solar, I made over 7 figures, just all self-gen solo. And we eventually just had 6, 7, 8 guys just duplicate exactly what worked for myself. And eventually we had an army of people doing 400 some out of just an Airbnb itself. So I think that results speak for itself. And there's no really reason to reinvent the wheel when you do have top producers that have been able to duplicate it. This is actually what works. So just making sure that the system and process is really easy for people to actually learn and come in and just be a sponge and hit the ground pretty much running. But the hands-on approach, I would say it's more of work ethic, like leading from the front, getting out there by 9 o'clock in the morning, right after the morning meeting, being with your team at all times and being the last one home still when you have a lot more on your plate, or you might be a lot busier than most other people. But I've just always been someone that I don't think results lie. And then I also think work ethic doesn't lie either. So if you can lead from the front, it's pretty easy to have a really cool culture that just wants to get better every single day. And I think gamifying it naturally comes when you're the one that's really being the pace setter.
Yeah. Speaking of gamification, what are some incentives and things that you've seen that really worked best to help motivate reps?
Yeah, I've always realized that the materialistic stuff, like when you start making a ton of money and you got guys that are making 6 figures in 1 month, sometimes the materialistic stuff really doesn't work. I've realized that like more of a one-on-one structure, almost like a March Madness bracket where you're kind of constantly advancing. I think it makes a lot more fun, where it's more of like your pride's on the line versus here's a Louis Vuitton bag or something like that. But yeah, I just realized that making it fun, it usually does come down to having more like one-on-one battles. Like I'm not losing to you this week, my man. But that would just be for me. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, CJ?
Yeah, I think to Chance's point, for us, we run tons of competitions and incentives, but it's less about the prizes for these sales reps and more about the pride of winning. And I think we do spend a lot of time and resource on developing cool swag for guys, because I think the key, if we're talking about, I mean, I agree with Chance, you have to create a culture where the reps care about winning more, like just the fact that they won the round or the game more than the prize. But then on the flip side, you also have to create these prizes that they can't just go buy at Louis Vuitton. So we've put a huge emphasis on creating custom swag that they can't get anywhere else. And so there's a point of pride when they're wearing, like Chance has got that hat, smile big. And if we have similar things where a rep sees that and it's like, oh, you won that tournament, that's why you have that hat or that shirt or that kit, whatever it is, because you can't just go buy that. And so I think that's the key for us, is besides creating that culture where you got to win, death before defeat, the prizes have to be something, because or else you're just going to spend millions of dollars on prizes because everyone's making so much money.
Yeah, Daniel, what about you?
I mean, they're both dead on. You know, if you're making really good money, you could go buy whatever the prize is probably. And so if you could do something unique, I think the other thing is coming up with creative games. Not, you know, that's the other piece of it, coming up with creative games for both setters and closers. You know, there's a lot of cool things you can do out there to get creative and you know, making the game itself unique to where it's like people usually just want to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree that operations should also focus on that for the operations team, because if they're also incentivized, then they're also going to be the ones that they're going to want those fun games and those prizes that are out there. So as we said earlier, incentivizing installers, permit applications, anything that you can gamify your business just to make people more motivated. It's just going to help them maybe want to spend that extra hour before leaving the office and finishing submitting those permits for the day. Now, last question. As we go into 2025, what are you most optimistic about in the solar industry? CJ?
I think I'm most optimistic about finally getting to a point where the industry is kind of stabilized and recovered from the trauma of the last couple of years. And the winners, really, the cream has risen to the top. And so I think the people that are left are serious players. The people that are left know what they're doing. And so I feel like 2024 was the primer, and 2025 is going to be the explosion. And so the people that are in the correct, that have placed the correct people in place and have the right systems in place, are going to have a massive 2025. And I think that's just super, for me, it's super exciting, because I can't remember who said it, Daniel or Chance, but a couple years ago, it was just so easy to make anyone could do it. Like a caveman could do it, as you know, for the Geico commercials. But now it has become a little more difficult. So all the pretenders are gone, and what's left are the people that are actually know what they're doing. So it's going to be great for the solar industry in general.
Love that. Daniel?
I mean, I'm probably one of the biggest optimists that there are, and I'm super excited about 2025. Yeah, I think interest rates will come down, so you'll see loan products get a little more competitive. In some markets where TPO is not as strong or not viable, loans will get more competitive again with their current utilities, what they're currently paying with their utility rates. Utility rates are continuing to go up, and you know, I don't know. I think 2025 is going to be big. Like CJ said, I think some of the big players that went away, I think, created a lot of opportunity for the people who are doing it right. And I'm excited to see kind of what happens next year.
Great. Chance?
Yeah, I agree with CJ on that. I think that there's a lot of people that exited the industry, and I think that there's a lot of fat that was weeded out of the industry as well, which makes it a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but I would say it's a little bit better. So I'm excited for that. And then also I am just excited to keep slinging batteries and starting to get to know a little bit more about that, because I have seen like a lot of perks on actually being able to sell it. I used to never really sell batteries, but now I think it's an essential in the deal. So I'm just excited for that to keep advancing, and markets are getting a lot better, even in Arizona and Florida. So I think it's pretty special that we're able to sell in different markets kind of the same exact way as kind of old NEM 2.0 California. These markets are starting to boom.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. We really appreciate you. Any attendees that want to get in touch with any of the panelists, you can just reach out to us at Scanifly, or you can look on LinkedIn. But if you want to join their team or work with them as an EPC, feel free to reach out there. And we thank everybody for their time today.